So these are readings this week full of conflict. The disciples are having this argument about who is the greatest, and the psalm says, "Render evil to those who spy on me." And in wisdom, holy smokes, there's this entire murder plot going on. And in James is talking about conflict as well. If ever we're worried that we live in a polarized time, there's apparently some precedent for it. And in James, James says something that is really fascinating, giving advice to this community about conflict. James says, you don't have what you need because you don't ask. So submit to God, and you're going to have what you need. So I think, I don't know, a week ago, 5 days ago, there was a article in New York Times by a rabbi by the name of David Wolpe. Maybe some of you read this piece. Wolpe was writing in anticipation of Yom Kippur, the Jewish feast of repentance and reconciliation and atonement, and talking about what it is to reconcile. And it was kind of a two-part essay. The first part talking about what if you have wronged another person, and he had a strategy for responding to that, which maybe you're familiar with from some other contexts. There were sort of three things that Wolpe suggested. The first was we start with an apology, and saying you're sorry is ideally something that we do without equivocation. So ideally we do not offer the sort of apology that we offered as children, which is, yes, I punched him in the face, but he punched me first, right? That's not an ideal apology. Ideally we would name what we've done without explaining why it was justified. And if we can, we name the impact of our actions on the other person. That's often hard. In a way, the child who's punched another child has an advantage here because it's actually very clear what the damage is, right? I see your nose is bleeding as a consequence of my actions. It's tougher when we have maybe said something that's cut another person and we don't know how that's hurt them. Father James last week was talking about how much the tongue can wound, and that sure is right, isn't it? So this is how we begin, with the apology, and if we can, naming the impact. Wolpe suggests that then what we need to do is engage in some reflection about what we have done. I think this is the same thing as what the 12-step tradition calls a fearless moral inventory. So there's some examination of this is maybe the time to ask, why is it that I did the thing that I did? I know that a lot of the cruelty that I've engaged in over the years has had at its root a desire to belong, a fear that I didn't really belong, and kind of a cheap and nasty way of making community with other people is to tear down someone who's not in the room with you, isn't it? So you make fun of how they dress or how they talk or I don't know what, and by doing that, there's a kind of gross bonding that takes place, and so I noticed that was a tendency for me to do that, and it's something that, well, here's Wolpe's third step. Having apologized, having engaged in self-reflection, here's the third thing you need to change. You actually need to live differently. And that's certainly something that I have tried to do. I've decided, I don't like this habit of tearing down people who are not in the room. I end up sort of feeling terrible about it afterwards. The bond that I've built with other people by doing this feels false. I end up wondering, gosh, if we're in the habit of tearing down people who are not in the room, what do they say when I leave? My old stagehand friend, Paul, had a wonderful line about this. He said, Martin, everybody but you and me is a jerk, and when you're not here, you're a jerk too. And that's real, right? So I decided, I don't want to engage in that behavior anymore. I want to change. So that's the last step. in what if you've wronged another person. The second part of the essay, I think, is harder, and that is the second part of Volpe's essay. He asks, what if you're the one who's been wronged? And in particular asks the question, why is it so hard to forgive people? Why is it so hard to reconcile with another person? And Volpe's answer is one that I certainly felt convicted by, and that is there's something quite powerful about having the status of being the one who's wronged. You have moral superiority over the other person, and maybe you have justification for revenge, for vengeance against that person. And those are both really seductive things to hold on to. As a child, I compiled lists of resentments. They weren't usually literal lists of resentments, but I certainly was aware of everything in them. And sometimes the resentments were about neighbors or fellow students or, I don't know who in my life, but mostly they were about teachers. Teachers who had a great deal of power over me, who at least in my estimation, had this sort of godlike power over my life, and there was sort of nothing I could do to change it. So I'd compile these complaints. I was marked lower than I should have been on the test. I should have gotten an A, but I got a B in the test. And one time, Mr. Greaves made the entire class do a detention for talking, but I hadn't been talking. And there's a reason the Geneva Convention prohibits collective punishment. It's wrong. And what are the other standbys? Our other standby complaints about teachers. He thinks he knows everything and he's mean. And, I never really did anything with these lists except occasionally share them with friends who were very glad to agree that I was 100% correct and everything I said was justified. And Mr. Greaves really, he's the worst, and his mustache is dumb. And, yeah. So this is what, and to tell the truth, I probably was older than 10 years old the last time I did that. This may have been something I did more recently than that. So we've resumed on the third Thursday of the month. I've resumed going to Holiday Park Plaza, the retirement community that's a block away that had stopped during pandemic, and I've resumed doing a Eucharist there on the third Thursday. And so we do the Eucharist for folks who are living in assisted living or skilled nursing. And most of the folks who are there are quite elderly, and they've frequently led fascinating and full lives. I often chat with people before the service gets started, and this one woman was telling us that she'd been married 65 years. Oh my God! Before her husband's death. There's something amazing about a marriage that sustains across the years like that. And often on Thursdays, I'll share with the people there what I'm wondering about, talking about on Sunday. And I told the gathered people about my childhood lists of resentments. And I could tell this woman was quite animated, was quite engaged as she was listening to this. And she told us afterwards, told everybody afterwards, oh, I had a list like that about my husband. And she said I'd actually moved out, and we were wondering about getting divorced, and I had not been to church in forever. And for some reason, I went to church, and the person preaching talked about that list, talked about exactly that list of complaints, and she said it was like the preacher was talking to me. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of it's like the preacher's talking to you, but yeah, okay, someone's right. It's either awesome or terrible. It's sort of depending on it can be it can be an experience when that happens. And anyway, so this happened. It was like, and she made this decision that she wanted to put this list down, or at least do better than I was doing with my teachers. At least talk with her husband about the stuff on it. And well, I mean, you kind of, spoiler alert. I started with they remained married 65 years, right? Amazing, this choice. And on Friday, I was at Doug Scott's funeral. And Doug, some of you might have met him. He was a priest around the diocese, and singular guy, amazing guy. And it's the only funeral I've ever been to that started with an essay from the deceased. I've never experienced that before, but it was very fitting, if you knew Doug, that he would have remarks prepared for us. And he told this story about, so he's a young priest, he's got little kids, it's around 1981, and he's got a brand new car, and he's struck by a drunk driver, and horrendous accident, like just carnage, and very nearly dies. So his funeral is very nearly 40 years ago, as opposed to on Friday. And in the time after the accident, Doug has to figure out, he has all these surgeries, and he is in chronic pain, and he has to figure out what he's going to do with the other person, with the drunk who hit him, who survives the accident as well. And Doug is just enraged by this guy's behavior, by his selfishness. His lawyers, there's going to be a court date, and his lawyers come to him and say, what do you want? And he says, I want that guy destroyed. I want you to destroy him. And the day the court date comes, it's 2 years later. The court system does not always move fast. And it's 2 years later, and Doug is, sort of girded for battle. And he sees the other driver come in, sort of trying to fix him, and I've got you in my sights. Look, and he realizes the other driver is a child, that he's a teenager who, what happened is he, as Doug put it, raided his parents' liquor cabinet. He got blotto and then went for a joyride. Terrible mistake, and a mistake that a lot of young people have made. And Doug decided in that moment he didn't want to hold on to his rage anymore. What he wrote is that he realized that 2 years of rage was burning up him and not doing anything to this young person. He decided he wanted to put it down. And Doug's essay ends with the words, I just felt this weight. I felt this weight leave me. You may remember Jesus' words, come unto me, all ye that travail and are heavy laden, and I will refresh you. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So I said this is not easy stuff. Like, what if you're wronged? It's not easy stuff. There is something, holding on to that rage is really seductive. Holding on to the kind of moral status of wanting revenge and being entitled to revenge is really seductive. And I want to be clear, I'm in no way suggesting that we put up with awful behavior. This is not an ode to returning to abusive marriages. There's some marriages you have to exit. There are some marriages that have died, and you need to name that. This is not an apology for sticking around in abusive churches or anything like that. I certainly don't want to go that direction. Sometimes you have to bring a relationship to an end. I think what Wolpe is talking about, what forgiveness is about, is not saying I'm gonna stay in this no matter what, but rather saying I'm not going to be bound to this other person in rage. I'm not going to be bound to the person who struck my car. I am Well, I'm telling a lot of anecdotes. So I'm going to tell an anecdote from recent experience about my own choice to be bound to someone or not. So there's we're doing some flood remediation work at home. We had our dishwasher blow up a while ago, and which actually in and itself could be a thing to be enraged about, I suppose. And so there's a porta-potty outside that the contractors have been using, and I don't know, when was this, Phoebe? It was a week ago. Phoebe's got like this "oh my God" expression on her face. Like, are you really going to tell this story? She comes out looking fine. Don't worry. So there's a porta potty outside, and I looked out the window, and there were 4 boys in the porta potty at the same time, which is like this is never a good sign. And so I thought, okay, I bet the contractors are going to appreciate it if I don't just passively watch whatever shenanigans are going on. And so I went outside, and there actually appeared to be smoke coming out the bottom of the porta potty. So I said, like, what's going on? And this one boy really did not appreciate being asked what was going on in the port, and he told me to be on my way in the using words you're not allowed to say in church. He used all of the words you're not allowed to say in church, and it was startling. It was a startling encounter. And I realized, so after, when did this? This is 7 days ago, 5 days ago, I don't remember. And that ever since then, I've been, thinking about the stuff I should have said. Or if I'd been more manly, they would have been afraid of me or respected me, or I don't know what. It's like making up these scenarios where there would have been a more just outcome to instead I'm it's the full marker of middle age, which is I'm complaining about how the kids don't have any respect. And anyway, I decided after this kind of went around my head for a while, I thought to myself, like, I don't want to be bound to this child in rage. I think what the kids say is, like, why are you permitting this person to live rent-free in your head? And that's a thing that happened, and it's just time to put that down and let go of my kind of moral superiority over him, let go of my my right to some kind of revenge. It's time to put that down. It's time to forgive. And that's kind of a trivial example, although it's a real one. It's trivial. It still was sort of hard to do, and maybe will continue to be a little bit hard to do. I don't know how you do it with harder stuff, like the drunk who hits you, or like someone who's really betrayed your trust, or someone who has deliberately set out to hurt you. It's a question I've been asked a bunch of times over the years, and I don't know what to say except I think James is trying to answer this question. James says you don't have because you don't ask, and so submit to God, and God is gonna do what you need. And I think sometimes what putting down the chain of rage between us and another person looks like is saying to God, I cannot forgive this person, but I believe you can. I believe you, God, can forgive this person. Your property is always to have mercy. So I'm going to outsource the work of forgiving them to you. And I'm going to ask that maybe you may put it in my heart that someday I'm going to have the capacity to join you in forgiving them. But I may never reach that point. And I'm going to leave forgiveness with you and trust that with you. And that, I believe and I trust, that is a prayer to which God always, always says yes.